dreams. Yeah, Freddy Krueger in your sleep. It's 100 D. And when you wake up, they are 100 D. Still looking in the mirror. 40 plus, I can rock the Coachella. You know who the jurors. Shit, angels, let's go, let's go. These thoughts in my mind every day I wake up. Ask God, give me another try. As you should do the same when you know your curses and your man got range on it. Louis V on the chapel walls, liquor stains on the front hills. Forgiveness sold to the highest bidder. They only respect the teachers with the most views. Lamb blood beneath both shoes of the righteous. You will across these red bottoms are priceless. Wherever these footsteps lead is where the Christ is. And where the Christ is where the life is. I brush the dirt off my shoulder, I'm feeling radiant. You saw the ruler of this world, my Lord created it. Gentle fit, children trees, I'm mediating it. Scriptures written in graffiti, look I'm painting it. I wrote these bars with clean hands and a bare heart. Tell you about a shepherd who turns dirty sheep into clean flock. Check the burial plot, there's nobody in it. Forever living on forgiveness, grace.
This is part true. You won't find very many people who are Afro-American who will admit it. But if it is true, why? It is true that there is a sluggishness, intellectual sluggishness, academic sluggishness in almost any Negro community. But this exists only because of the result that has come upon us through years and years of slavery and being held down in this society. This is why I made reference to the book Crisis in Black and White. This particular man gives a very good scientific analysis as to why this lethargy exists in the Negro community. It is something that has been created by the system. The system is designed to make the Negro student lose his interest in education almost before he even gets started in school. And the parents usually, who are also limited where education is concerned and who have run into so many barriers and obstacles despite the fact they had education, sometimes they ask themselves, what's the use? So as long as the system that we are in exists, and this system, the survival of this system depends upon the continued exploitation of the black man in this country. The survival of it depends upon the continued degrading of the black man in this country and the necessity of using us as the whipping boy and the alibi and the excuse. As long as this system exists, then you will find that our people will have the same attitude toward education. And they have a justified, I should say, they have an attitude that can be explained. But at the same time, the burden rests upon the leaders of the Afro-American community to try and instill within the youth especially the desire to further their education, because without it, you're not going anywhere on this earth today. Back during slavery, when black people like me talked to the slaves, they didn't kill them. They sent some old house Negro along behind him to undo what he said. You have to read the history of slavery to understand this. There were two kinds of Negroes. There was that old house Negro and the field Negro. And the house Negro always looked out for his master. When the field Negroes got too much out of the line, he held them back in check. He put them back on the plantation. The house Negro could afford to do that because he lived better than the field Negro. He ate better, he dressed better, and he lived in a better house. He lived right up next to his master in the attic or the basement. He ate the same food his master ate and wore his same clothes. And he could talk just like his master, good diction. And he loved his master more than his master loved himself. That's why he didn't want his master hurt. If the master got sick, he'd say, "What's the matter, boss? We sick?" When the master's house caught fire, he'd try and put the fire out. He didn't want his master's house burned. He never wanted his master's property threatened. And he was more defensive of it than the master was. That was the house Negro. But then you had some field Negroes who lived in huts, had nothing to lose. They wore the worst kind of clothes, they ate the worst food, and they caught hell. They felt the sting of the lash. They hated their master. Oh, yes, they did. If the master got sick, they prayed that the master died. If the master's house caught a fire, they prayed for a strong wind to come along. This was the difference between the two. And today you still have house Negroes and field Negroes. I'm a field Negro.
Yo! Hold up, there we go. Yo! Welcome to yet another episode of ADQ's Renaissance. I'm your host with the most, keeping it 100 from coast to coast. Through God I boast, ADQ. First of all, I want to say, in honor of the birthday king, of the birthday god, I'm a field Negro too. I'm a field Negro too. And in honor of all field Negroes everywhere, I want to say, happy born day, happy solar return, happy birthday to the great El Haj Malik Shabazz, formerly known as Malcolm Little, better known to the world throughout as Malcolm X. Happy birthday to Malcolm X. We celebrate Malcolm X, though his birthday is not deemed a national holiday, much like Martin Luther King's is. Still, we who know the words of Malcolm X, we who have read this book, which I'm in the process of reading right now, we who have read this book, we celebrate Malcolm X. Me, I decided that I had to celebrate him by talking about him on my particular platform, ADQ's Renaissance. It's a Wednesday night. Thank you all very much for joining me. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with me, and I appreciate that. I also would like to say rest in power to the comedian, to the artist, Paul Mooney, Negro Damas, indeed. Rest in power to him. We speak power to him as he is now joining the ancestors in the ancestral realm, aka heaven. So, ashe to that. He is now an ancestor. Now back to our ancestor, Malcolm X. I had to talk about Malcolm, but I could not talk about Malcolm alone. You know what I'm saying? I had to bring some company. Now, this brother who was joining me, he is a part of a very special club in regards to ADQ's Renaissance. He is part of the Three Timers Club. Three time. Before I get into that, brother, first of all, I forgot to say, I want to shout out to Nat Man, dope song. Nat Man, shout out to Nove, shout out to GP, shout out to Queston. Dope song. Looking forward to the album. Nat Man need to come up on here and need to talk about his album. You know what I'm saying? He need to come talk about the album. Now, as I was saying, the brother who was joining me, he's already been on here twice before. He came on to talk about the greatness that he does. He came on here to talk about the Criterion speech by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So if you happen to have forgotten this brother, which of course you didn't, I mean, for goodness sake, he was on 105.1 last night. I'm sure you have seen him doing his thing, teaching somebody something, educating somebody about entrepreneurship, about the tenements of whatever out there is to teach, because the brother's that smart. Allow me to reintroduce you to him. The brother's name is Dominick Hand. He is a traditional and social entrepreneur, educator, and consultant with the Racial Equity Institute. He served as a former administrative support assistant for the middle college at UNCG, where he taught college courses and assisted other teachers with curriculum instruction. He served as a youth representative for Melanin LLC, organization in Genesis Baptist Church that hosts summer camps, mentorship programs, and other community outreach organizations that service youth living in low-income neighborhoods. His passion for assisting marginalized youth. Somebody say marginalized youth? Get the book. Anyway, his passion for assisting marginalized youth. I lost my place being silly. Okay. Encourage him to start a program called Brotherhood Breakfast, which gathers young black men together to share and navigate challenges they face in a race-conscious society. Dominick attended the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, where he received a bachelor's in sociology with a concentration in criminology and education and African American diaspora studies. He also received a master's degree in sociology with a focus on race, criminal law, media, and entrepreneurship at the University of North Carolina in Greensboro. During the plight of his academic journey, Dominick was exposed to the anti-racist work of the Racial Equity Institute, LLC, in 2015 and joined REI in 2018 with a commitment to raise awareness toward the impact of systemic discrimination and racial equality. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to ADQ's Renaissance for the third time. Please welcome my brother and your brother. Please welcome the intellectual actionaire himself, Mr. Dominick. Give him a hand. Yo, brother, what's up? Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Appreciate you, brother. Peace, 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 man. And ADQ, bro, I appreciate you allowing me to be on here, not for the first, not for the second, but for the third time, man. It's an honor to be on the show, man. I appreciate the growth, and I appreciate everything you're doing, brother.
Man, I appreciate you, man. You out here killing the game. You out here, well, I shouldn't say killing the game, because when you kill something, it's dead. You are out here breathing so much life, brother. You're out here breathing so much life.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I praise due to the Most High, man. That's just what I'm striving to do, man. Just to be a light to somebody, you know.
Speaking of the Most High, I shared a couple of scriptures this morning in relation to who we're going to be talking about tonight, Malcolm X. I think one is like from 1 Timothy 2:15, study to show thyself approved. Hosea 4:6, my people suffer for lack of knowledge. Do you have a scripture from Quran that would line up, that correlate with Malcolm X and his entire life? Because those two scriptures, I'm about to tell you why they correlate with me.
Yeah, I would. There's a scripture, a very short one in the Holy Quran, that I think kind of matches up with Hosea 4, which is my people will be lost due to a lack of knowledge. It is called the Times. I think it's in chapter 103, if I'm not mistaken. And it's only 3 verses. It says, in the name of Allah, the beneficent, the merciful, by the time, for surely man is lost, except for those who believe and do good deeds, and exalt into one another to truth, and exalt into one another to peace. Hosea 4:6 also says that people will be lost due to a lack of knowledge. And it's not because they don't know the knowledge, it's because they reject knowledge, and their creator will reject thee. And I correlate those two verses because it kind of shows that we will be lost in time, meaning that we'll be lacking knowledge because we're lost in time, because we've lost knowledge of ourselves and knowledge of time. Except for those who are understanding of what knowledge is, recognizes knowledge, what knowledge is, accept it and believe in that knowledge that they've been exposed to, and the information and how it moves them spiritually, and exalt into one another, to the people who are lost in that knowledge, to wake them up from being deaf, dumb, and blind like Malcolm did, and to exalt us into truth, and to allow us to be patient with ourselves and with our people, so we can actually come into the knowledge of ourselves. So we will not be like the people in Hosea 4 that will be destroyed due to a lack of knowledge and rejecting knowledge when it's come to us, because we are knowledgeable of the time in which we live in.
Brother that has Malcolm's story written all over it. It really does. You know, I made the so in preparation for this, I've been listening to his speeches, been checking out some of the book, you know, powerful book. You need to have this. I know you have it, but anybody who's watching this, you need to have this book. But
that was half of my college experience right there. That book right there, Autobiography of Malcolm X. Man, and that actually that speech he played, the House Negro, the Field Negro, I listened to that a month straight. Because I felt like I was like, you know, I call it historically white college university. People call it PWIs, but I was in that institution. I kind of felt myself kind of having some of those House Negro tendencies. And so I listened to that speech kind of like Malcolm was checking me. And so I listened to it repetitively. In fact, I went in like a silence. I didn't talk to people for a couple of days, or I really kept my speech very limited, because that speech in that book really spoke to my spirit and really shifted my paradigm and my political, social, and cultural ideologies.
You know what? I will tell you, whenever I listen to that speech, whenever I listen to what he's saying in that speech, I will check myself. I will say, yo, am I House Negro?
Yeah.
Am I House Negro? Am I out here saying, what's the matter, boss? We sick? We sick? Nah, we all have that tendency due to the disconnection of our original culture, of our original roots that we have, and the westernization that has taken place in our spirits and whatnot. Well, not in our spirits, but in our psyche, due to the westernization. So a lot of us are unwilling House Negroes. You know something that I formed in my mind about Brother Malcolm. So I find great amazement and great inspiration at the fact that he was a hustler, pimp, gambler, numbers man, thief, robber. Well, thief and robber is basically the same thing, but all that with the 8th grade education, right? And then he went to prison, educated himself, Hosea 4:6, in your scripture, but he did all that, and then he turned around and became this well-renowned intellectual orator and whatnot. But you know something that I believe, Dominique? I believe that is who he was the whole all along.
I agree. Yep.
See, one thing that we all could learn from that is, see, Malcolm, Malcolm was a sponge. He reflected the type of environments that he was in. If you're in Detroit, around hustlers and whatnot, he's gonna feel the need to hustle if he's not taught well. If he's around thieves in Harlem, he's gonna want to be a thief. You know what I'm saying? Got around brother in jail who was spitting some science, something that just tapped into him, and that's where his journey into the Nation of Islam began.
Well, can I interject for just a moment, because I think there's some details about his childhood that I think we really have to highlight to understand the brilliance of Malcolm X and why he became such the great orator that he was. Keep in mind, brother, who his parents were.
They were Barbies. They were Barbies.
So Malcolm would spend a good portion of his childhood listening to his father, who also was a great orator, preach the philosophies of Marcus Garvey, who ran one of the largest Black organizations at the time period in which he was alive. Also keep in mind that Malcolm X, even though, his father was killed by KKK members, right? And his mother had to move around to get Malcolm into schools, he did go to an integrated school. And Malcolm talked about this. He went to one of the most integrated schools that a Black person can go to at the time that he was growing up. And even though he only had an 8th grade education while he was in school, he was one of the top students in his class. Actually, he was voted for class president. His students, white students, nominated him to be the class president. And he actually had an aspiration and inspiration to becoming a lawyer. But then his teacher discredited him and actually encouraged him to be a carpenter. And I think that's what kind of shattered the spirit of Malcolm and kind of steered him away to go to the street life, because he felt like that in the world that he was living in, he was being limited. His intellect was being limited. So I think it was important to kind of say that coming out of the womb, Malcolm was destined for greatness. But because of the racist environment in which we live in, we can clearly see that Malcolm did not have that opportunity to shine, brother. Okay, I think the brother is still, I think he left. Hopefully that brother come back. I was going in on the brilliance of Malcolm. Yeah, let me check to see if that brother is gonna come back, because I probably might have to run his show in just a moment. And I probably will be running his show. But also, I'll add this as this brother's coming back, and I probably will appear on his show. You know, one thing I appreciate about Malcolm X and his story is that his story really aligns to the everyday Black person. And I think even to this day, when you read Malcolm X and his story, it touches you in some different way. Like, everybody probably didn't have the same background that Malcolm had, but we can't relate to his struggle. And we all can relate to his resistance towards the white power structure. And so when I read his book, I found there was just an immediate connection. And I think it just got to the point where I really wanted to grow and to expand it. And a brother came back. I was just talking to this audience while you came back about why Malcolm just touches us so much, because I think because of his story. Malcolm didn't always live a righteous life. We all didn't always live a righteous life. But we've had the ability, if we were just put into the right space, to have our talents, our intellect, our gifts to be exploited for the right reasons. It allowed us to shine and prosper. And Malcolm had that opportunity while he was in the nation. Of course, at the end, it didn't turn out that way. And that can be discussed, and there's many different reasons why it didn't turn out the way that it did. But Malcolm will forever be a living legend to us because of his story, and because he pretty much from turning his life around and becoming righteous and speaking the unspoken truth of the bottom of Black America, from that time that he had opportunity to raise himself on that platform with the nation to his assassination, he stayed true to that message. And I think that's why we love him so much, because he does speak that truth, that invisible truth that America tries to hide but desperately needs to hear.
Well, first of all, I apologize for that. I forgot to tell you, my computer is demon possessed, and when powerful conversations like this is presented to it, it might want to act up a little bit. So if it does, spit some knowledge, and I'll be right back, brother. So
yes, sir.
So Malcolm was called racist. Number one, racist in the definition form, it is impossible for a Black person to be racist. Mm-hmm. Malcolm, Minister Farrakhan, any member of the Nation of Islam, you would say that the Nation of Islam and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad does not teach hate. It's just that the roots of the truth that they are teaching, which is trying to get me, you, and all other Africans to realign with the culture that we have been ripped from. It sounds like hate because it's that nasty. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. I think what's interesting about Malcolm's story is when white media got a hold of it, because you're right. When Malcolm first came out, he was not the most liked person. In fact, it kind of reminds me of people in the Nation of Islam, particularly the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and people talk about him. Anti-Semite, separatist, racist, Black supremacist. This is what Malcolm was called. And I think, honestly, if Malcolm were still alive today, preaching the same message, he'll be called a patriarchal, he'll be called a sexist, he'll be called all different types of names, right? So, but now everybody loves Malcolm. Everybody wants to praise Malcolm. And the same folks that would critique him would praise him. And so I find it very interesting you know, some like the hypocritical nature. And some of these people are the most critics in terms of Malcolm's life and what he meant to the black community. It's like one minute you say that he's all these negative things, and then the next minute you're praising him, right? Especially like those who are white, and so white media in particular. So I just find it very interesting, right? How you didn't really like this man for the vast majority of his life, except for like the last 4 months when he actually talking about working with you, right? But still kind of kept that black nationalist ideology. So it's just really interesting to me. But I do think anybody that speaks truth to power, regardless of your race and what organization that you're coming from, you're going to be a target, right? And we see that happening, especially when we talk about the vaccine trials, issues going on with the war in the Middle East. I mean, it's so many different things that could be said. I'm not going to go into the depths of it because I don't want to get too political. But I think when you speak truth to power, you're automatically going to be called out and isolated into a box, right? Due to mainstream media and their power and the control that they have. And of course, you can't be a racist, because a racist means you have the intel power, right? And Malcolm had a lot of power, but he didn't have that social and institutional power to control the lives of people in the way that white America has power to control the lives of people that live in America. Brother, you still there? Okay, I'm gonna allow him to keep his internet's gonna get together, man. But yeah, I think we have to just be kind of transparent as we talk about the life of Malcolm X, and just to acknowledge that he spoke a hard truth. But that's why people love him so much, because he spoke that hard truth. And I know a lot of folks didn't agree with him. He knew a lot of folks did not agree with him. However, a lot of folks couldn't deny some of the things that he was saying, especially when he was talking about the power structure that we're living in. And what's interesting is that when you look at some of his speeches, one of his most famous one is called The Ballad of the Bullet, and you just read it and you just study the context, you will really see that a lot of things that he said in that speech is so applicable to 2020, 2021. From a political standpoint, from an economic standpoint, and from the standpoint of really talking about the struggle of non-white people, specifically black people in America. Black people are still living in very similar conditions that they were living in the 1950s and 60s, particularly the bottom 20% of America. There still is a cry for justice that is not being met by the powers that be, right? The United States government has still failed to really properly address the issues of black poverty in this country. We have taken the power structure, right, and created all these different reports, the Moynihan report, the Kerner commissioners, right, the war on poverty, which will later become the war on drugs. We have taken all of these initiatives to try to really address the race question in this country. And what we've done is that we've reduced the issue that used to be systemic in terms of everybody understanding for a certain period of time that it was a systemic issue. And now what we've done is reduced it to a behavior phenomenon. What we're saying now is that the reason why people are living in the ghetto, the reason why people are struggling to make ends meet, the reason why people have poor education is because they choose to be in that position. And Malcolm said that is far from the truth. There's been plenty of evidence to show that this is a systemic issue. How did black people end up in the ghetto? Why do black people go to the poorest schools, right? And I'm talking about the bottom 20% of black people, right? The poor, one that's living under that federal guideline. Why are they in those conditions? They live in the poorest neighborhoods because of Jim Crow segregation, redlining. Property taxes from those neighborhoods allow them to go to the poorest schools, right? Overcrowded, underfunded. They have the worst teacher turnover. So that means they're not getting a full educational experience. And we all know that when you don't have the full educational experience and you live in a high poverty neighborhood, you're more susceptible and more likely to join gang activities, to get involved with drugs, to get involved with teen pregnancy, right? To get involved in all the negative aspects of well-being. And you end up in that cycle of poverty. It's this vicious cycle. And Malcolm X was talking about this constantly in the 1960s, mid 1960s. And what's crazy is that message, even though King was saying the same thing, even though our black leadership has been talking about the same things, it seems to not really hold a dent in the collective consciousness in America. And that's why Malcolm stays relevant in 2021, is because he echoes the issues that are happening with the race problem in America. And the race problem in America, just like the 1950s, has still had that same echo, and it has not budged. We have not collectively budged. What we've done is that we just socially got along a lot better, but we have not structurally, economically, and politically got along too well. In fact, we've kept the lines very much similar. The power dynamics very much similar. And I think Malcolm's speeches, once you listen to them, you will really see that he's actually speaking in today's time.
It's like he was a prophet.
And he was prophetic. Yeah, definitely prophetic.
Well, I wanted to ask you before Satan took over. Do you think Malcolm would what do you think Malcolm would have said about the vaccine?
I think he would say what Elijah Muhammad and Minister Louis Farrakhan would say about the vaccine. Just don't take it. I mean, let's be honest, the Nation of Islam stance and a lot of black people's stance, and it's not just the Nation of Islam thing, it's not a black Muslim thing. A lot of black people are just very timid on vaccines since the polio vaccine, right? There's been evidence from the CDC. I know people are following Rizza Islam, who's being shadow banned on every single social media platform that we can think of right now. But they've had substantial evidence to show that these previous vaccines that black people have been taking has actually increased a lot of different diseases like autism, right? And the CDC actually did a report that actually said that there was a connection with previous vaccines given to black children that led to an increase in autism. I think it was over 500% from previous vaccines that were given to the black community. Autism went up 500% within the last 40 years. So we have to really think about what's inside of these vaccines. I'm not saying that, for me personally, being in the healthcare system, I understand the process of vaccines. And I understand that if it really goes through the proper trials, right, particularly from the FDA, some of these vaccines can actually be beneficial to the well-being of people. I highly don't recommend taking vaccines in general, but if you want to make that choice for your well-being, there are some vaccines that are very useful and actually have gone through proper clinical trials. But a lot of these vaccines that are being marketed to us, like drug dealing, have not really gone through the proper trials. We're just undergoing the test runs of it. We really haven't really seen the dynamics and the efficiency of these vaccines. And you can clearly see that there's mixed reports coming out from the CDC, from Dr. Fauci, from various different people. So if you want to take the vaccine, go right ahead.
And what I love, going back to Malcolm, what I love about Malcolm is he tried to talk sense to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
he tried to warn us about things like that because a lot of us with this miseducated, westernized mindset, we hear a large populace of people saying something and we hold that as truth. We mistake universal truth with mass appeal. But before Satan got into my computer, we agreed that the masses during Malcolm's time were not in favor. We're not in favor of him. I love him when he called the March on Washington the farce on Washington, because when you think about it, that's exactly what it was. It was a farce. He said they're doing too much singing, and not enough swinging. That's another thing. He taught ballot or the bullet. Okay, I'm going to say this. I have a lot of friends who are white liberals. If this offends you, I am sorry, but there is truth to what Brother Malcolm said about this. He did not speak kindly of the white liberals. Mm-hmm. He said the only difference between the white liberals and the white conservatives is the white liberals are the ones that are posing as our friend. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're a white liberal and you happen to catch this, I want you to ask yourself before you get your panties in the bunch. I want you to ask yourself, why did Brother Malcolm feel the need to say something like that? Mm-hmm. Is that me? Not me, ADQ, but you. If you're a white liberal, ask yourself, is that you? Are you the snake in the grass? Are you the one that is using your whiteness to mentally further the mental trapping of black people? You know what I'm saying? And Dominique, I'm gonna tell you something else, something that I noticed from the movie, right? I'm quite sure that you all in the Nation of Islam don't view the movie very highly. Mm-hmm. But there's one thing that I noticed out of the movie that I loved. It's one thing that I noticed at the movie that makes you look at Malcolm's movement and Martin's movement, right? And make you ask yourself, which one is really the more successful one? I would say that the Nation of Islam, because I looked at the movie, right? You had people who heard Martin Luther King's crap. This was during the scene when they marched to the hospital because Brother Johnson was beat up by the police, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you've seen the movie.
Yeah.
So Fruit of Islam, right? Marching, discipline, quiet. They said we will not get violent and loud unless we have to, right? Yet the protesters, they was the one doing all the screaming and all the shouting and stuff, right? So when you look at the black community today, here in 2021, which group has actually been more fruitful and successful in their endeavors? I would say the Fruit of Islam.
Mm-hmm. First, let me just comment because I want to go back to the vaccine because I got cut off. Talk about the vaccine.
Oh, sorry.
You make an educated decision about that vaccine. You know what I'm saying? If you have to deal with the consequences that may come from taking it. But if you feel like it's a safe route for you, you know, so be it. So I'll just say that. So that's what I'm personally staying away from. I'm going to listen to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan on this one. I'm going to just stay away from it. But if you want to make that personal choice, you know, so be it, right? Because only you understand your circumstances and you have enough research at your disposal to really see if it's a safe vaccine or not. So I'm gonna just pause it there. I want to make sure I complete that statement and close that chapter. Because you know, in case people want to go back and look at some of the statements that I made about the vaccine. The second thing is that you know, when it comes to figuring out we have to ask ourselves this question when it comes to gaining power within your community, right? Do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? And I think what we do when we look at movements that have happened, that have kind of like birthed out of some of these moments of struggle and moments of power dynamics happening in America, is I don't think there's a right way of doing things, because what we see is that when both of those tactics were being executed, the powers that be always figured out ways to stop it. What I think you're saying is that the military structure of the Nation of Islam was more effective in its own way compared to the nonviolence demonstration of Martin Luther King. I think both of them were actually successful. I think both of them actually provided a power outlet for the Black community to advance. I think that's why we're in the position that we're in right now, because both of those movements exactly existed at the same time. I think there's just a time period where we need to be more structured and militant like the nation. And there's a time period where we need to have nonviolent demonstrations. And I think we've seen over a period of time that we've actually evolved into that within the last 5 or 6 decades. So I think both of them were effective in their own. I don't think one is more right than the other. You know, and I want to be transparent about that, because I don't want to say that Martin Luther King's work was not effective. It was extremely effective. I totally think it was effective. I just think Martin Luther King had a wake-up call when he realized that this goes way beyond just changing a few policies and winning the hearts of white people. There's power structures that are set up that are keeping people structurally locked in to their social positions, right? And if you don't meet that criteria of social status, you're not going to make it in America. And it's a cycle, right? These systems are set up to keep people in cycles of dependency, cycles of powerlessness, right? And I think King was coming into that awakening. And so what he realizes that though his nonviolent demonstrations were very effective, some of the things that he saw the nation doing and other young people who are starting to organize and demonstrate some of those kind of very structured, you know, tactical ways of massive power demonstrations, King started leaning towards doing more of those demonstrations himself before he was assassinated. So again, my answer to that is that, you know, we have to evolve in understanding the power of both of those entities and how they were able to demonstrate power and to bring power within the community and to bring justice in the community when, you know, when one tactic fails, right? Because I think nonviolence had its run, but I think there's sometimes where we actually need to be a little bit more structured and militant and to organize and to do some type of a demonstration that's really going to challenge power with power, if that makes sense.
It does. Like, the white supremacy that has taken place with a more unified front that's saying, hey, if you, I'll put it this way. This is gonna sound like a very silly example, but this is what I'm thinking. So a few weeks ago, me and a friend, we were hiking, right? And a goose bucked up against us, right? And hissed because his chicks was right behind him, right? So I took from that, in parallel to you all, to what you're saying. You come with force, we're gonna come with force, and we ain't gonna back down.
Yeah, that's all. It's just the fearlessness that needs to be. And like I said, nonviolence demonstration also a show of fearlessness. But there is another sense of power in terms of the environment that you see happening when Malcolm would organize the Fruit of Islam, right, to do certain demonstrations. And so that is both of them are examples of fearlessness that's just done in different ways, and their tactics are very different. And I think they both need to be studied and understood, right, by Black people, especially in our time period, who are trying to figure out a way to challenge power.
So I got a question for you. Is it true that in Brother Malcolm's final days, he was actually trying to get back into the Nation of Islam?
Yes, there are tapes and records that show that Malcolm was trying to, air some of the fires that was kind of created, but it's by the tensions between the nation and himself. And there was actually, from my understanding, my research, that actually Elijah Muhammad was heavily considering letting him come back in. He just had to, as said by Dr. Wesley Muhammad and the research team in the Nation of Islam, that if he just, make a speech to kind of blow out some of the fires that he created and some of the things that he said about Elijah Muhammad, then there will be a welcoming him back into the Nation of Islam. So there was some private conversations, some recorded conversation of Malcolm having interest of coming back into the Nation of Islam. So yes, he was starting to feel that pressure the more and more that he was coming into a rise. So you got to remember, one thing people don't understand is that Malcolm's reach was very expansive. Like he was starting to talk to a lot of leaders in Africa, a lot of leaders in the Middle East, and they were actually supporting him and backing him. So he had a huge target on his back. So Malcolm knew that he needed that security. He needed to be in a space where he can be fully protected, because he was definitely becoming big, big to the point where people wanted to get rid of him. And if you actually go back and I don't know if people are familiar with this, but the daughter of Malcolm X actually just got with attorney Ben Crump and actually did a press statement and released a letter of an agent that worked with the NYPD, and they provided a letter actually, demonstrating, and him actually saying in his deathbed, this letter that I think he gave to his son, confirming the FBI and the NYPD were co-conspirators in the assassination of Malcolm X, and they actually planned that.
Dick Gregory once said that the people who so-called assassinated him, the brothers, they were firing blanks at him. All the shots that killed him came from up top. It was the CIA that killed him.
Yeah, I can't confirm that. I have to continue to do my own research, so I won't speak on that. But I do know that letter was released. I would just encourage people to follow the daughter of Malcolm X, and look at her videos, right? Because she's been on a lot of media channels, white media channels, with this letter affirming that the man that was working for the agent, I can't think of his name right now, but the agent that was working for the NYPD actually confirmed that the FBI and the NYPD were co-conspirators, and they have been planning the assassination of Malcolm X at that time, and that they were very much involved into his assassination that day that it happened at the Auto Ballroom. And so I would encourage people to look at that and to study that. You can actually connect the dots with who killed Malcolm X at the very end. And the individual that made that video, he actually identified who the trigger man was in terms of the sawed off. But the other men that were there with him, their identities are still, if I'm not mistaken, I think they were named eventually and identified. But there were actually two men who were falsely accused of assassinating Malcolm X and actually served time, who are part of the Nation of Islam too. So it's a lot of mess in there, and it's a lot of misinformation that's been said about him. But the people who are actually there are coming out with letters in their deathbed, kind of affirming that the co-conspirators of Malcolm X's assassination was the FBI and the NYPD, which, you know, is not a surprise to me, but I know for a lot of people, they needed that information because there's still a lot of smoke with who really killed Malcolm X and who was really behind that and who the trigger men were. And I think it's important for us to do our research to really get that clarity, because Malcolm X, I mean, he means so much to us. The point that even, you know, 2 or 3 generations later, we're still talking about what happened to him, right? And just the impact that he had on our lives. So it's important for us to have that closure and to really figure out who's really responsible for his death.
Like I said earlier, study to show thyself approved, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, I still think it's amazing of how he was able to just shun the hustler, the debaucherous lifestyle of which he came from in prison, find Islam. Like a lot of us, it's so hard for us to let go of our vices. Which at the same time, you know, when you look at Malcolm's background, you know, you connect the dots. You know, parents were Garveyites. Not only that, but Malcolm wanted to be a lawyer. So if you want to be a lawyer, of course, you got to do a whole lot. You got to do a whole lot of reading. So perhaps when you went to jail, he was already a profound reader. So he opened some books, and that's how he started the process of becoming the intellectual that he has become.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think the things that made me really respect Malcolm, and this is what I learned from his book. He said that the things that he carried with him, because he got up 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, you know, said his prayers, and that's how he started his day. He says he usually would start his morning with tea, with the watch, because he wanted to make sure that he was mindful of time, right? And that he understood the value of time and how he utilized his time. And he always kept a good book with him, because Malcolm understood the power of education. And I think he said education is the passport to the future, and tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. I think that's what he said. I'm paraphrasing it if I'm not mistaken.
You're right with it.
Yeah. So Malcolm knew that information was important. Just like today, information is important. I mean, we're in the age of information, so it's very easy to manipulate information. But if you have enough information in your brain, especially information that can be applied, information that speaks to the truth, information that can change the paradigm and the consciousness of the collective, then you're in a very good space. And I think it's really good to be knowledgeable about multiple things that's happening. And I respect Malcolm because, you know, that's what lawyers do. They study everything. They study their own stance on things. They study their opposition, and then they come to a conclusion based upon the facts that they have in front of them. So I think Malcolm was very not only truth-telling, but he understood what the opposition, you know, the people who disagreed with him, he understood how they thought, the books that they read, because he read those books. I think he's probably read more books than a PhD, and you can clearly see that when Malcolm was on the stage talking to people who had high academic statuses, master's degrees, PhDs, you can clearly see that they couldn't even intellectually handle him, because he was able to use his intellect, but yet his simplicity to kind of tear down some of their ideological frameworks and academic frameworks.
Yeah, I mean, this guy with the 8th grade education could go toe to toe with some of the sharpest minds possible.
And it kind of makes you wonder: are their minds really sharp, or are they just, you know, suffering from education overload, and they're just kind of talking, but they're not really connecting dots, or they're not really using information that is simple enough for the common person to understand and to use to move places. You see, I think, you know, anybody can have, you know, information to their disposal, but it's very hard for someone to have knowledge that can be applied and used to organize people and to move people in a certain direction. Those are two types of different people, the knowledgeable person and the intellect. It's just two totally different people and how they walk in this earth. And I think wisdom gives you ability to take that information that you apply and to create experiences from that either advance you or teach you valuable lessons about your human experience that allow you to push forward and to teach others and to show them ways that they can actually advance themselves as they go through those similar struggles that you just went through in your experiences.
Tell me this: what did you think? I'm going to get back on the movie. What did you think of the movie, the Spike Lee movie?
I appreciate the artistic value that Spike Lee provided. I've watched that movie several times. You know, it's hard to get Black people, anybody in general, to watch a 3-hour movie about a man that's had such an impact on our lives. You know, I just want people to keep in mind that the movie is for entertainment, but it's not for, you know, a factual understanding of Malcolm's life. You know, because there's a lot of characters that were added in, fictional characters added in to kind of close or to kind of create, you know, drama, because it's labeled as drama, right? So fictional characters were created, like the people who exposed him to the nation, some people who were, you know, his friends, a lot of people were left out, you know, who were in the Autobiography were left out, you know, and Spike Lee even tells you, like, look, I'm creating a drama. I'm creating this movie is solely for entertainment, right? If you want to get the facts, read the book, right? Study the FBI files, you know. So Spike Lee did his homework, but we have to keep in mind that he exaggerated aspects of Malcolm to create this drama. So I don't look at it as an aspect of a factual replica of Malcolm's life. I just look at it as what it is entertainment. And Denzel Washington playing Malcolm, I mean, that was just iconic, you know, very, very iconic. And look who funded the movie too. That also was said a lot about, you know, are we going to really tell an actual true picture of what happened to Malcolm X? You know?
Among the names listed from the movie, I saw Michael Jordan, Winfrey, among others.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I remember reading a review about Malcolm X, about the movie, and it was talking about how Denzel Washington is shorter and darker than Malcolm was.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, he still did his thing.
I think he still did his thing, you know, and like I said, even the daughter of Malcolm X even said that Denzel did a good job. I mean, of course, he cannot be Malcolm. Denzel is not Malcolm. You know, she said that just certain aspects of Malcolm's mannerism that just cannot be duplicated by anybody, regardless of how many people play Malcolm. And a lot of people play Malcolm, but I think Denzel is just one of the most talented Black male actors that we have in the industry right now. He's top tier. So if you put him in any movie, he's gonna perform, because that's what Denzel does. He's an actor. He's a great Class A actor, right? So he's gonna give you a performance. He's gonna give you a film, right? So I think that, you know, a lot of people are going to remember Denzel Washington for playing Malcolm X at that time period in the 90s when that movie was released, because it was a wonderful film altogether. Even though it wasn't 100% factual, it was a great film. And Denzel was the perfect person to play that, regardless of his height and his skin color. He gave us a great Malcolm.
I will also say the movie dropped like back in '92 when I was like 7 years old.
Yeah.
First time I saw it, I shed a tear.
Yeah, I did too. Yeah. Yeah, I've seen some independent documentaries on Malcolm, and I think, because I was 21 when I started reading the Autobiography of Malcolm X, saw the movie and all of that, because I was just born when that movie came out, so, you know, I didn't even see it till later on when I got older. But yeah, I did too, man, because, you know, you hear that story. It's such an iconic individual, right? Has touched your lives in so many ways. Has you know, shifted your paradigm about the racial world that you live in so many different ways. A humanitarian in so many different ways that I don't know, I think everybody bought Malcolm X classes the moment that they woke up and understand the brilliance and the iconic nature of this man. And so I think if you didn't shed a tear looking at, if you're Black and you didn't shed a tear looking at Malcolm X, then I think something else has to probably hit you to get you to understand the true struggle and the fight to really see Black people prosper. Because I really do want to see Black people prosper. Even if Black people don't want to see themselves prosper, I do want to see them prosper because of just the struggle, right, and the pain and the suffering that Black people have had to endure, right. Some people say that the crimes that happen on Black people since they've been to America is one of the most original. Well, actually, it's one of the most horrific documented tragedy that's happened to the human experience outside of the indigenous people. What happened to the Aboriginal people in Australia, Jewish people. Right now we're experiencing what's happening with the Palestinians. I mean, it's just so many acts of genocide. The Rwanda genocide, what happened in Haiti. American slavery is definitely on that list of one of the most horrific human tragedies that's happened to a group of people, and the way that it was done, right? Because we're still seeing the residue of American slavery happen to Black people, and to just know that, to have a consciousness of that, and to know that your people are suffering because of that residue. I mean, it's just a pain that all of us who are conscious that want to see better have to bear, and to see one of your warriors, a warrior scholar like Malcolm X and many others who were inspired by him to just die the way that he died, be assassinated the way he's being assassinated for just solely speaking the truth and really trying to empower folks. It's a sad reality because we see it happening to so many different leaders. Just leaders getting knocked off in the 60s solely because they were speaking truth to power.
People are scared of the truth, man. We live in a world that thrives off of lies. So the truth is the truth to those who appreciate a lie. The truth is a threat. And when they hear the truth, it's like the mission in keeping us blinded, keeping our minds chained, has been usurped. So you get an outspoken warrior to go out there, keep the power. They gotta get rid of him. They gotta wipe him out. That's why, unfortunately, Malcolm didn't even live to see his 40s.
Yeah. I mean, just a lot of our leaders, young leaders, just taken out too early. Mega ethics. Martin Luther King was only 39. I mean, it's just so many. And a lot of them did get assassinated, but a lot of them got, kind of scared out. Exiled from the West. There were a few Black Panthers. Kwame Ture was exiled. Shada Shakur was exiled. So it just happens. If they couldn't get CET through killing you or incarcerating you, definitely like the country. And so that's unfortunate. We still have a lot of political prisoners, inside of our prison system. Right? A lot of them are still there. And it's a heavy thing. We had an opportunity to release them last year, right? But that didn't happen.
Dominique, we're going further. Just want to get a little sad here again.
Say it again.
Trying to get a little sad here again.
Everything all good. Trying to get a little while.
It's all good, man. That devil is working to keep the power from happening.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but it's okay.
Yeah, it was in and out. Okay. Good now.
Say, I can't think. Say Black Power.
All right, Black Power. Is it there? Good.
Still a little sad, man. I'm sorry.
Don't worry about it. Let me say it now. You go ahead and ask your question. I'm going to handle it right now.
So, like I said, Malcolm X's life is very influential all they did. The way that he came into his conscious mindset is an example of what can happen when we pick up a book, when we turn off the phones and stuff and pick up a book. This book. Hey, this book, A Marginalized Voice. When we pick up a book, study to show thyself approved. That's why brother Dominick here is the intellectual individual that he is today. Look, I'm looking at a library right behind you, brother.
Yeah. I mean, I encourage people to read, and the reason why I read so much is because, you know, one book that also transformed my life was reading the autobiography of Frederick Douglass. Right. You know, reading his autobiography, reading the stories of, you know, the narratives of a slave girl, reading Harriet Tubman's story, just reading about the events happening in slavery. You know, they made it against the law for Black people to read.
Yeah, and right.
Yeah, they would literally cut your tongue out, right?
And your fingers off. Yeah.
Cut your finger. Like they would just do so many different things just so you couldn't read, like, because they knew that if you had knowledge, you had enough information that can be applied to wake up other people's awareness. Which, if they had awareness and they really understood the power dynamics, and if they changed, if they just challenged it through a collective understanding that something isn't right here, that their condition is wrong, you know, waking up the deaf, dumb, and blind, then it's automatically going to create revolution and change. And so people knew the power of information because they can subjugate your body, but they can't take away your mind. They can't break your spirit. You know, if you know the most powerful thing, I think Biggie said this too. A mind is a terrible thing to waste. It is, right? Because again, they can take away your house. They can take away all the things that really matter in your well-being. But if you got this, you can make some things happen. And I've seen some things happen. That's why I have so many books behind me, is because I don't want to take knowledge for granted. And I remind myself is that I may not read all these books. Maybe this information will come to me in many different ways, because I know we have YouTube now, and you know we have many different ways that we can absorb and take in information and process information. But nonetheless, I want to have these books because I'm this is not just for my existence; it's for the next generations to come, to really understand the power of reading. You know, the power of feeding your mind, the way you feed your body, right? The way that you feed aspects of the earth. You got to feed yourself. You got to feed your spirit, man. So I highly encourage reading, especially for Black people, because your ancestors couldn't read. It was against the law for them to read, because they knew people of powers to be. They knew that if you have enough information inside your head and you can connect the dots, you're a very dangerous person, because they can't control you now, right? I think the first step to freedom is through the mind. So read and free that mind. Because the moment that you know, because Frederick Douglass said, he said, I used to pray to God, right, to answer my prayers. But I realized that God didn't answer my prayers until I moved my feet. When you read and you got your mind made up, your prayers can be answered, because the information inside your head is going to tell you one day you just need to make a move and be the answer to your own prayers. And so I'll leave it there, man.
First of all, that's a scripture. It's in James. You know, faith without works is dead.
Yeah.
Number two, would you agree with this? Would you agree that a lot of issues that affect the way that the mind works when we get to the latter ages of life, would you agree that a lot of issues could be alleviated if we exercise our brains throughout our lives by reading?
Yeah, I mean, and all you really need to do is read 15 to 20 pages a day, and you don't have to be like everybody reads differently, right? It's really based upon how you process information, right? Like, how do you process information? If you read the same 5 pages every single day, how do those 5 pages shift the way that you think about the world that you live in? You know, so, you know, it's important to read books, right? But I really am curious about how you process the information for the books that you're reading. That's just as important to me as it is reading a whole bunch of books, because you can read a whole bunch of books and not really learn anything. You just have a lot of information in your head, but you haven't really connected dots and created a concrete and thorough analysis on how that information can move you and move the people that you come in contact with. You know, so if you read something, bro, you can read anything, but if it doesn't make sense to me and you don't really quite understand it, that means that you need to go back and read that and to develop a better analysis so you can walk this world with a different insight than you did before you started reading that book. So again, I tell people, like, read to understand. Don't just like read it just to read it. Like, really process that. You know, sometimes I spend a month reading a book, just one book. You know, that means I'll probably read a little over 12 books a year, right? But if I can gain a lot from that one book, I would sound a lot better than someone that's reading 2 or 3 books a month and they're not really saying anything.
Yeah, like there's a big difference between reading and looking at words.
Yeah.
What you don't want to do is look at words. What you want to do is just read, see what is the message that the author is trying to convey.
Yes.
And take from there. Like one of the main things that I have learned from reading y'all biography of Malcolm X is he was his mother and father's lightest child.
Yes.
And his red hair, I'm assuming was passed down to him because his grandfather was a white man who raped his mother, who raped his grandmother to form his mother.
Yes.
Another thing that I learned that was interesting is that brother Malcolm was actually his dad's most favorite child due to him being his lightest child.
Yeah. I don't know. I wouldn't say favorite. I'm not too sure, but I know that there was and I can't confirm that because it's been a long time since I read the book, but I know he treated Malcolm differently than he treated his darker skinned brother and sister. Okay, so it might be in there. I'm not too sure. But I do know this. I know that because Malcolm was lighter skinned, that he did treat Malcolm differently, and that the mother actually had to punish Malcolm because the father just wouldn't punish him the same way that his mother would punish them. You know, so I mean, I want to bring this up. I mean, we can't ignore the fact that colorism exists within our community. It exists.
I was just about to say something about colorism, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it exists, bro. And it's not just in the Black community. It's in every community. Latinx people deal with it. Asian people deal with it. But I do want to focus on our community for just a moment. We have an issue with colorism, right? And typically lighter skinned Black people, you know, we just experience this world a lot differently than darker skinned Black people do. And we have to acknowledge it. We have to be transparent about that. You know, I know amongst each other, we have those conflicts amongst one another, you know, but when we're talking about dealing with the overall world and how we navigate, it's a totally different dynamic. That skin color variation does make you navigate a lot differently, you know, and even the way that we treat one another, right, based on that color coordination really has to be addressed and thought about. Now, I'm not saying that all light-skinned people have favor in the Black community and they just walk differently and see differently. Some of them catch hell from Black people. And, you know, there's some darker skinned people that might not really have that experience with colorism as they walk through the community. But overall, generally speaking, there is a lighter skin, darker skin issue that has to be addressed. And the color line only exists because we live in a society, we live in a world, a Western world that says the lighter is better, darker is worse. You know, and we've internalized that. So part of our work is that we got to deal with the trauma of colorism. We got to deal with the trauma of classism, right? We got to deal with the trauma of all of these different things where we think that because we're lighter, or we got more money, or that we live in this community, or we have access to these certain material possessions, that we got something over those who don't have it that's in our same community. When really, you know, compared to the white world, they don't care how much degrees that you have. They don't care how you look. They don't care how smart you are. To them, you're still Black. And you still don't step on their toes. You still don't try to act like you're above them. You got authority over them, right? Because this is their world. And they'll let you know in subtle ways that this is their world. And I'm not saying all white people are like that, but there are quite a few that think subconsciously like that.
I want to get to that to the white point that you brought up in a second, but I do want to say that, okay, so you're a lighter, younger man with a fresh cut, clean shave.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Me, I'm darker, got locks, bearded, right? Brothers though, we brothers.
Absolutely.
We, both of us walk down. Both of us walk down the street. Two cop cars come up. They're gonna get both of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Also, however, both of us are educators. Black
Mhm.
kids listen to both of us.
Yeah.
They going that's going to inspire them. So
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
need to kill colorism. My sister,
Yeah. I agree.
my sister is lighter than you are, brother. So
Wow.
we need to kill colorism because it takes plantation mentality to separate black people because of color. Two black people who are of my complexion can get together and make a black person who is whiter than white people. So we all come from the same ideology, and it's stupid to separate, to hate each other because we're darker or lighter. So I'm calling for an end to colorism.
Yeah, yeah, and I think our generation is handling it a lot better than previous generations have been. I'm not saying that those issues don't come up; they do come up, right? They definitely come up and they show up, right? And it's been propagandized to us in so many different ways. But I think we do handle it a lot better, and we're looking past that. And I feel it every time I'm around my people. Like, you know, when we're around each other, we're really talking about some serious stuff. We do look past that color line, you know. So, yeah,
that's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
That's a beautiful thing. And now, as far as white people go, when I've seen in interviews and stuff where brother Malcolm was kind of like softening his criticism of white culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not white supremacy, but white people at large.
Mm-hmm.
And when he started Muslim Mosque Incorporated, he said white people can help us, just enjoy us.
Well, no. Okay, yeah. No, he said that he didn't mind working with white organizations. His main priority was to create some black unity first before he started unifying with everybody else. So, you know, we're gonna always have when you speak the truth, friends of all races, ethnicities, nationalities are gonna come to you because they respect the truth that you speak. Right. So when you speak generally about a group of people, that means you're not individualizing them. And I think people have to understand that. You know, when Malcolm spoke generally about white culture or white supremacy, he was literally talking about the culture and the ideology. But he noticed there's some white people who have resisted that. White people have always resisted aspects of white supremacy, aspects of white organizational culture, right? A racist, you know, country that has been developed. No, a country that's been developed based upon a racist history, right? So white people have always wanted to work with Malcolm. White people have always really respected Malcolm, even though he has said a lot of things about, you know, the white power structure. And so when Malcolm made those remarks, what he was really saying is that, of course, I'm going to work with white people. Of course, there's always been white people that want to work with me. I'm willing to open myself up to that now. I just want to make sure that black people are organized and prepared to deal with, you know, other white people, because what we saw is that when black people rush to work with white people and we're not organized, what's going to happen is that white people are going to end up taking over because they're more organized. Like, that's happened so many times, right? We see that there's so many different scenarios in which that has happened. And sometimes we can't blame white people for that. But sometimes we got to look at ourselves because we are very unorganized. So I respect what Malcolm was getting at. He says, I don't mind working with white people as long as we're really addressing the core issues and that there's some unity within black people so we can actually hold our own and making sure that we're getting just respectability and distribution of resources and wealth and power that typically white people already have. And a lot of white people don't have to work for that because it's already been set up for them, right? They just have to, you know, do a little bit of work, organize, follow protocol, and they're good to go. Power is going to flow in a direction in favor of them. So when they want to help us, they just know they're already coming with a power dynamic, right? We have to make sure that we have our own together as well. So I respect Malcolm saying that. And like I said, I'm not opposed to working with white people who really want to, you know, really address these structural realities that we're living in. But I want to make sure that, my people and other non-white people who really want to see change, we come correct.
Yeah, exactly. Like when I saw Malcolm saying that, knowing the Pan-African that he is at heart, knowing that he has the well-being of us in mind and at heart, when he said that, I was like, okay, that's where I'm at with it. I got some white friends.
Mm-hmm.
I applaud white people who participate in the struggle. Participate, not lead. Participate. Mm-hmm. But at the end of at heart and at the end of the day, I have the best interest of my people. Number one, like I want to make sure that my house, being me being black, I want to make sure that that's in order. Mm-hmm. Because, like, I'm not a fan of integration, but I am a fan of diversity. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't believe in assimilating into the mainstream society and trying to fit in. That's integration. Mm-hmm. Diversity, though, is me taking everything that makes me into different houses, different societies, and saying, yo, what y'all got here? And learning something. Diversity, of course, is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's a topic for another discussion right there. And yeah, like I said, I think it'll be hard to live in a world where we don't coexist with people who come from different racial backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds, different national backgrounds. Like I said, I'm just all about people having power within themselves and their communities to control their reality and their existence. I'm all for that. So we can create some type of cross-racial, cross-ethnic, cross-national solidarity amongst each other, where people can have a sense of their own power, have control of their own resources, and can determine the politics and the economics of their community. And we can all coexist within that. I have no issues with that whatsoever. I just think that when a dependency is created from one community towards another, right, that becomes a problem, because we can't talk about unity if one person has all the power and this group is disempowered because this person is power hoarding, right? So I don't disagree with that. And I think we need to come to a space, because, rather it's integration, separation, diversity, whatever we call it, people in these communities who are suffering, who are oppressed, are lacking power. And the reason why they're lacking power, because another group of people has found comfort in power hoarding and has normalized that. So we need to find some type of balance and power, right? Because I don't think we can come together as equals until everyone has control over their own lives, control over the politics and economics in their community, and actually has say-so in the political process for everybody.
And that's why Brother Malcolm was preaching separatism, so we can get among ourselves and build ourselves up. Not saying, not throwing the middle finger up at all other groups, but to get to ourselves, channel what made us kings and queens and history makers and innovators in Africa, and get that popping before we, cohabitate with other societies. So as we start to wrap up here, Dominick, where do you see your inspiration and love for Brother Malcolm taking you as the future goes by, as time goes on, Mr. Intellectual Actionaire?
Yeah, when I study Malcolm, I try to, especially in the space that I'm in right now, I try to study Malcolm not only for the greatness that Malcolm brought to us, but to study him as a human being. Malcolm wasn't perfect, just like all of our leaders, they weren't perfect, right? So when you study them, study the great work that they've done, but also study some of the mistakes that they made, because we're faced with the same challenges that Malcolm is facing right now. And actually those challenges are a little different, a little bit more sophisticated than the times that Malcolm was living in. So when I look at Malcolm, I really study Malcolm objectively. I study his movement, I study his power, I study how he was able to transform his life. And I studied some of the mistakes that he made, some of the decisions that he made. I really analyzed them. And as I move forward, I want to make sure that I'm learning, right? Because, you know, I tell people what's the best way to learn something in life? Through other people. I mean, what's the best teacher in life? Excuse me. Your experience or learning from other people's experience. Both of them are great teachers, but you'll be most effective when you learn from other people's experience, right? Because the definition of insanity is to what? To repeat the same things, hoping for a different result.
Exactly.
If we're in the same situation that we study other people go through, and they did this, and this was the end result, and it wasn't effective, if we do the exact same thing that that person did, then by an intellectual standpoint, we're intellectually insane, right? So we cannot continue to do the same things that was done in the past, hoping for a different result to happen, right? We got to be able to shake things up. We got to be more creative than that, right? So if anything, I learned from Malcolm is that I'm going to continue to study his greatness. He still has a huge impact on my life to this day in terms of really understanding and having a deeper love to the condition of Black people and a love for Black people. But I'm also going to study him in terms of understanding, well, what were some mistakes that he made or what were some missteps that he had experienced that will allow him that I think personally would have furthered his movement had he would have done this. Because believe it or not, Malcolm, his courage was very unique in the time period in which he was alive. And he stepped into spaces that I don't think a lot of Black people would have stepped in, and he spoke truth that I don't think a lot of Black people would have spoke at that particular time period. And that's what makes him so special, because the way that he did it and how he did it. And I think a lot of folks who came after him was able to evolve from the platform that he started, from the foundation that he started. And so that's why he's so pivotal, because many of our leaders today have really learned from the platform and from the fearlessness and from the character of Brother Malcolm X.
Yes, indeed. Like Malcolm X, David Banner made a dope song titled Malcolm X, and the Honorable Minister Farrakhan, you know, he once served up under Brother Malcolm.
Yeah.
Now before we shut this down, real quick, well, actually take your time, but at your own pace, what's tell the people about Intellectual Actionaire.
Maybe drop all that and talk about Intellectual Actionaire. So right now, the Intellectual Actionaire, it is my personal branding business. I also do digital marketing. So my personal branding and digital marketing consultant right now at this moment. I'm helping teachers, artists, and entrepreneurs build up online digital brands that they can either monetize or make more massive community impact. You know, Brother Ben says the what's better than making passive income, which for a lot of people who become entrepreneurs, is kind of like a result that they want to experience in life, like be able to work where they don't have to wait 2 weeks to get a check. They can have money coming in at any moment from work that they either are doing or have done in the past, and it's just passive making income for them. But what's better than passive income is passive impact. And I agree with Brother Ben. You know, so I want to help people to not do something solely for the money, but to do things solely for the impact, right? Solely for the mission, solely for the purpose. And so as a life design coach, as an intellectual and a scholar, I want to use my talents that I've developed within my experiences as an entrepreneur, as a life coach, as an artist, to really help people to find that brand, to find that space, that platform they can create for themselves, to make that impact so that their impact can take care of them and their livelihood. So that's essentially what the Intellectual Actionaire does. I do everything from fashion, which I'm still working on now. But that's part of it. Oh yeah, appreciate you. Thank you. So I do everything from fashion, but the main things that I do is online education and personal consultations. That's kind of the core where I am right now. I do have a partnership with Brother Soul Society. We're distributing the Live Alkaline Water. So shout out to Soul Society, shout out to Live Alkaline Water LLC. Yeah, that water right there, that's liquid gold. So even before digital branding, before the marketing, you gotta get access to that water. You gotta drink that water.
I've been drinking through the whole interview, and I've been calling it a quiet treasure.
Yeah, and that's what it is. It's literally gold water, right? And so that is a partnership that I have with those brothers. And so I'll be, across the across the eastern part of the United States of America, really getting the water to the people, starting with the community that I'm in right now. And so that's a little bit about the Intellectual Actionaire. You can find me on social media platforms, Intellectual_Actionaire for Instagram, Dominick Hand on Facebook. And of course, if you want to check out some more of my services, some more of my products, you can go to the intellectualactionaire.com.
I'm going to have to see if the Soul Society brothers get some of this water to my mom. She's in Gaffney, South Carolina.
Yeah. Just tell her to hit us up, and we'll stop by. Or if she wants to get it shipped or delivered, that's also an option as well.
Okay, I remember that. So Dominique, yo, man, always great talking to you, brother. Always great talking to you. Every time I talk to you, I feel like I gotten a little bit smarter. I'm gonna give you your flowers, man. I mean, you are a game changer. You are an intellectual mastermind when it comes to feeding the people. And brother, you're not even in your 30s yet. If Malcolm was here today, he would be very proud of you.
Yeah. I mean, those are some big shoes to fill, but thank you for telling me that. And I know a lot of folks have really discussed, Malcolm to me in many different occasions. And so I think it's just an honor just to know of him, to know of his mission, and to know that, I'm a part of a generation that was able to bear witness to that greatness and to be a part of leadership that also bears witness to that greatness. And so thank you, brother, for saying that. It really means a lot. And to folks that really do love Malcolm, just take in his spirit and just keep the movement going, right? Because our people desperately need leadership. We don't need one leader. We need leaders in our community, willing to just step up and do something a little bit better to create a better tomorrow.
I agree. Real quick before we go, I think I'm not surprised about this, but I think it's a shame that Malcolm X's birthday is not a national holiday like Martin Luther King's birthday is. But I'm not surprised that it's not. So it's up to us to continue to celebrate his born day year after year after year.
Yeah. And I think that should be for us. You know what I'm saying? Everybody doesn't have to, we don't have to make it a national holiday. Yes, Malcolm he was born on this soil, and he shook up the consciousness of the American people, regardless of what that message was. But he created space for people to think and to speak truth to power. And he should be acknowledged for that. But just because they don't acknowledge him or mainstream world will acknowledge, doesn't mean that we don't have to acknowledge him. Malcolm is our hero. He's our leader. And so we're going to continue to acknowledge him. So I make the 19th, of May 19th, the May 19th, I'll make that every day Malcolm X Day to the day. That'll be a personal holiday that I will, I'll celebrate, and I understand. And there was a fight for Martin Luther King just to get recognized, just for Martin Luther King Day to be a national holiday. There was a fight, literally a fight with Coretta Scott King. So shout out to the sisters in the movement, because they really have been, side by side with some of these great leaders. So Betty Shabazz, Coretta Scott, definitely want to give a shout out to the queens for the women in our movement that were right beside these powerful men and even have done the work in secrecy, making sure that these movements stay together. And so if it wasn't for Coretta Scott King and her work really, really pushing, right, our political leaders to recognize Martin Luther King for the work that he's done, then we wouldn't even be celebrating Martin Luther King Day. That would be a special holiday that we in our community would have to celebrate too. So, I think what we're doing is just fine. Creating these platforms to speak about our leaders and to control the narrative of how we speak about our leaders.
Exactly. So before we go, tell people one more time, how can they get in contact with you for your education consulting, your life coaching, helping the young men, everything that you do? How can people get
everything that I do, right? Again, you can follow me on Instagram, Intellectual_Actionaire. That's my Instagram page. Dominick Hand, my Facebook page. And of course, if you want to get on my personal website, it's the intellectualactionaire.com. Appreciate you, brother, for letting me be on this platform. May the Creator and the ancestors continue to bless you on your journey, my brother.
Thank you. I take that. I receive that. And back to you, brother. And on that, I would say Ashe, Ashe, Ashe.
Ashe, my brother.
Thank you, brother. And you all have tuned in to yet another episode of ADQ's Renaissance. Next episode, the 22nd is going down. We're going to have Javetta Miller. Shout out to Dominick Hand. Shout out to another Dominique that I know. If your name is Dominick, you're dope. You're dope. You're dope in my book. Dominick Hand, Dominique Wilkins, Dominique Williams, better known as Nico, and yeah. So, shout out to all Dominics out there. I'm ADQ. I'm ADQ. My eyes are bloodshot red. This is ADQ's Renaissance. Everybody have a blessed evening. Peace. Why in the world did I just do that? Peace for real.